The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across nearly a kilometer of polished crystal floors. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated areas, each zone carefully designed to accommodate their unique biological needs. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of different communication methods into something resembling universal understanding. Ambassador Zephyr 97 of the Crystalline Collective shifted nervously in her silicon-based form. The light refracting through her transparent body created rainbow patterns on the floor below. Today marked a historic moment. First contact with a species that had somehow remained hidden from galactic civilization for millennia. The human delegation approaches, announced the Council's central AI in its emotionless tone. Every representative in the chamber fell silent. Even the gas-based nebula lords stopped their constant swirling motions to focus on the massive entrance doors. High Counselor Vextar of the Reptilian Empire leaned forward on his scaled throne. His yellow eyes gleamed with curiosity and barely concealed hunger. The humans had been discovered only 3 rotations ago when their primitive vessels accidentally wandered into a trade route near the Outer Rim. Initial reports suggested they were a young species, barely past their first atomic age. Fascinating creatures, muttered Dr. Helix, the insectoid scientist whose compound eyes could process visual data at incredible speeds. Bipedal, carbon-based, surprisingly fragile-looking. Their ships use crude fusion drives. Hardly impressive technology. The chamber doors opened with a deep resonance that echoed through the vast space. 5 figures walked through, the human delegation. They moved with confident strides despite being surrounded by beings who could easily destroy their entire planet with a thought. Leading the group was Captain Sarah Chun, a woman in her early 40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple dark blue uniform with minimal decoration. Behind her walked Dr. Marcus Webb, an elderly scientist with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The other 3 members of the delegation looked equally unremarkable by galactic standards. They seemed so ordinary, whispered Ambassador Quillex of the Aquatic Territories, her gills fluttering nervously. No advanced cybernetic implants, no genetic modifications, no psionic enhancement equipment. High Counselor Vextar activated his species' natural intimidation display. His frills expanded, and his eyes glowed brighter. It was an automatic response when facing potential prey. The humans didn't even flinch. They simply continued walking toward the center of the chamber, where a platform awaited them. "Welcome, representatives of humanity." Vextar's voice boomed through the translation systems. "I am High Counselor Vextar. You stand before the Galactic Council, governing body of civilized space. Your species has requested membership in our alliance." Captain Chin stepped forward and performed a respectful bow. "Thank you, High Counselor. I am Captain Sarah Chun, representing the United Earth Federation. We are honored by this opportunity to address the Council." A ripple of amusement passed through several delegations. The human's primitive translation device struggled with some of the more complex linguistic concepts being broadcast. Ambassador Zephyr 97 noticed the humans didn't have any visible psionic amplifiers or mental shielding. "Before we proceed," Vextar continued, "the Council must evaluate your species' capabilities and intentions. As a standard protocol, we will conduct a telepathic assessment." Dr. Webb stepped forward slightly. "We understand, High Counselor. However, we should mention that humans have no natural telepathic abilities. We're not sure how effective such an assessment would be." Several council members exchanged glances that their translation devices interpreted as expressions of surprise or confusion. A species with no psionic abilities was almost unheard of in galactic civilization. "Irrelevant," declared Ambassador Kthen of the Void Walkers, his shadow-wreathed form shifting restlessly. "Our telepaths can read any sentient mind. Your lack of natural ability simply means you have no defenses." Counselor Vextar gestured toward a section of the chamber where 3 beings sat in meditation poses. They belonged to the Mindforge Collective, the galaxy's most powerful telepathic species. Their enlarged craniums pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as they prepared for the mental probe. "Telepath Prime Zura TH will conduct the assessment," Vextar announced. "She is our most skilled practitioner. The process is painless for cooperative subjects." Zarath floated gracefully toward the human delegation. Her species had evolved beyond the need for legs, instead moving through controlled psychokinesis. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow from within, and her large, dark eyes reflected depths of mental power that could crush most minds with a stray thought. "Which of you will submit to the scan?" she asked, her voice carrying harmonics that most species found hypnotically soothing. Captain Chen looked back at her team, then stepped forward again. "I will represent my species in this assessment." Zarath nodded and raised her hands. Energy began building around her fingertips, visible manifestations of psionic power that made several council members lean back in their seats. Even among telepaths, her abilities were legendary. "Remain still and try not to resist," Zarath instructed. "I will examine your surface thoughts first, then delve deeper into your species' true nature." The entire council chamber fell completely silent. This moment would determine humanity's fate in galactic civilization. If the telepathic assessment revealed them to be aggressive, deceptive, or otherwise unsuitable, the council could vote to quarantine their entire species to their home system. Zarath's eyes began to glow brighter as she focused her mental energies. Captain Chen stood perfectly still, her expression calm and ready. The psionic energy reached toward her mind like invisible fingers searching for purchase on her thoughts. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Zarath's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in the rhythm typical of a standard telepathic probe. Several council members relaxed slightly, expecting the routine assessment to proceed without incident. Then, something changed. Zarath's glowing eyes suddenly widened in shock. Her floating form jerked backward as if struck by an invisible force. The psionic energy around her hands began to flicker erratically. "Impossible," she whispered, her voice carrying notes of confusion and growing alarm. There's nothing there." And yet, High Counselor Vextar leaned forward on his throne. "Telepath Prime, report. What do you sense from the human?" Zarath steadied herself and tried again, this time pouring more power into her telepathic probe. Her entire body began glowing brighter as she channeled energy that could have dominated entire city populations. Captain Chun remained perfectly still, watching the alien telepath with curious but unafraid eyes. I cannot penetrate her mind," Zarath said, strain evident in her harmonic voice. "It's not that she has defenses. It's as if her thoughts exist in a space I cannot reach. But when I try to force contact," she attempted once more, pushing her abilities to their absolute limits. Energy crackled around both beings now. Several council members activated personal shields, sensing dangerous power levels building in the chamber. Suddenly, Zarath screamed. The sound cut through the chamber like a blade, harmonics of pure terror that made every telepath in the council clutch their heads in sympathetic pain. The Mindforge collective members' glowing form convulsed in midair before crashing to the crystal floor. "Telepath Prime," Vextar roared, rising from his throne. "What happened?" Zarath struggled to her hands and knees, her bioluminescent patterns flickering chaotically. When she looked up at the council, her large dark eyes reflected something that most of them had never seen from her species before: absolute terror. "When I touched her mind," she gasped, "for just a moment, I saw what humans truly are. Not what they appear to be, what they really are underneath." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs and alarmed chittering from dozens of different species. Ambassador Zephyr 97's crystalline form began refracting light in patterns that indicated extreme anxiety. "Explain yourself," Vextar demanded, his intimidation display now fully activated. Zarath slowly pulled herself upright, still shaking. "Their minds, they exist in a state of contained chaos. Every human thought exists simultaneously in thousands of different possibilities. Their consciousness operates on levels of complexity that our telepathy cannot fully process." Dr. Helix's compound eyes focused intently on the trembling telepath. "You're suggesting their mental architecture is more advanced than ours? That seems unlikely for such a primitive species." "Not more advanced," Zarath corrected, her voice still carrying undertones of shock. "Different. Completely, utterly different. Their thoughts don't follow linear patterns like ours. They think in contradictions that somehow resolve themselves. Love and hate existing in the same moment. Logic and emotion intertwined so completely they become indistinguishable. She turned to look directly at Captain Chun, who had remained calmly standing throughout the entire incident. And underneath all of that, Zarth whispered, underneath their kindness and their curiosity and their desire for peace, there is something else. Something that even glimpsing for a fraction of a second nearly shattered my mind. High Counselor Vextar felt a chill run through his scaled hide. In his 3 centuries of life, he had never seen a Mind-Forge collective member lose their composure so completely. What did you see? He asked quietly. Zarth looked around the chamber at all the assembled representatives, beings from dozens of species who considered themselves the pinnacles of galactic civilization. Her bioluminescent patterns had finally stabilized, but the fear in her eyes remained. I saw why they have no natural telepathic abilities, she said. It's not a lack of evolution. It's protection. Their minds exist behind barriers that aren't technological or psionic. They're fundamental, built into the very nature of their consciousness. Ambassador Kthen's shadow form shifted restlessly. Protection from what? Captain Chen finally spoke, her voice carrying the same calm confidence she had shown since entering the chamber. Perhaps we could discuss this more productively if I explain some things about human nature. We understand that our mental architecture might seem unusual to telepathic species. Unusual? Zarth's voice cracked slightly. Captain Chun, with respect, what I touched in your mind for that brief moment, it wasn't unusual. It was impossible. No sentient species should be able to maintain consciousness with that level of internal contradiction and complexity. Dr. Webb stepped forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Actually, Telepath Prime, that's quite normal for humans. Our brains evolved to handle multiple competing thoughts, emotions, and decision trees simultaneously. We call it creativity, imagination, adaptability. The elderly scientist's kindly demeanor hadn't changed, but something in his tone made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. We've learned from our own history, Dr. Webb continued, that beings with telepathic abilities often develop civilizations based on consensus thinking, shared consciousness, or hive minds. Very efficient, very peaceful. We respect that approach to existence. He paused, looking around the chamber with eyes that suddenly seemed much less harmless than they had moments before. But humans evolved differently. We learned to survive by being unpredictable, even to ourselves. Especially to ourselves. High Counselor Vextar felt his instinctual threat assessment systems beginning to activate. Something about the way the human scientist spoke triggered deep survival warnings that his species had developed over millions of years of evolution. Dr. Webb, he said carefully, are you suggesting that humanity deliberately evolved to be resistant to telepathic contact? Oh, not deliberately, Dr. Webb replied with a gentle smile that somehow made the temperature in the chamber seem to drop several degrees. Evolution rarely works that way. No, we developed our mental architecture as a survival response to something much more immediate. Captain Chun moved slightly, a subtle shift that positioned her team in a formation that looked casual but struck several military-minded council members as suspiciously tactical. Our species evolved to survive each other, she said simply. The silence that followed this statement was profound. Even the constant background hum of the chamber's environmental systems seemed muted. Ambassador Quillex's gills fluttered rapidly as she processed the implications. You mean, you developed consciousness capable of resisting telepathic intrusion because you needed to hide your thoughts from your own species? Among other things, yes, Captain Chen confirmed. Humans are naturally competitive, territorial, and aggressive. We learned very early in our development that survival often depended on our ability to deceive, misdirect, and outthink our opponents. Our minds became fortresses by necessity. Zarth was slowly backing away from the human delegation, her bioluminescent patterns flickering in what her species recognized as patterns of extreme distress. You don't understand, she said to the council. When I touched her mind, I felt the edges of what lies beneath their surface thoughts. They don't just think in contradictions, they weaponize them. Every human is simultaneously capable of profound compassion and absolutely ruthless calculation. Dr. Webb nodded approvingly, as if she were a student who had grasped a difficult concept. Very perceptive, telepath prime. Yes, that's quite accurate. We've found that emotional flexibility is crucial for survival in a universe that rarely presents clear moral choices. High Counselor Vextar's threat assessment was now screaming warnings that he couldn't ignore. His species had conquered dozens of worlds through superior military technology and tactical thinking, but something about these seemingly primitive humans triggered every predator instinct he possessed. "Captain Chun," he said slowly, "your species is requesting membership in our galactic community. Such membership requires a certain level of predictability. How can we trust beings whose minds are apparently designed to be deceptive?" Captain Chin's expression softened slightly, and for a moment she looked like nothing more than a middle-aged woman far from home. "High Counselor, with the greatest respect, I think you misunderstand our nature. We're not naturally deceptive, we're naturally adaptive. The same mental flexibility that allows us to survive conflict also allows us to form deep bonds, create art, love selflessly, and sacrifice ourselves for others." She gestured toward her team members. Dr. Webb here spent 40 years of his life developing medical technologies that saved millions of lives. Dr. Rodriguez designed the fusion drives that brought us to this meeting, not as weapons, but as tools for exploration. Lieutenant Commander Park learned 17 different alien languages in the 6 months since we discovered we weren't alone in the universe. The chamber remained silent, but the quality of that silence had changed. Fear was still present, but it was now mixed with something that might have been curiosity. What Telepath Prime sensed, Captain Chun continued, was our potential. Every human carries within them the capacity for both creation and destruction, love and hate, mercy and justice. We choose, moment by moment, who we want to be. Ambassador Zephyr 97's crystalline form had stopped refracting light in anxiety patterns. Instead, her transparency began showing the deep blue hues that indicated intense thought. "This is unprecedented," she said. "Most species achieve interstellar capability by developing either superior technology through logical thinking or advanced psychic abilities through mental evolution. You're suggesting humanity achieved it through chaos management." Dr. Webb laughed, a warm sound that somehow made the vast chamber feel smaller and more intimate. "That's actually not a bad way to put it. Humans have always been exceptional at taking impossible situations and finding ways to make them work. We call it improvisation." Counselor Vextar found himself in an unusual position. Every logical analysis suggested that these humans were potentially dangerous. Minds that couldn't be read, motivations that couldn't be predicted, capabilities that couldn't be assessed. Yet their behavior since arriving had been nothing but respectful and cooperative. "Telepath Prime Zura-TH," he said formally, "despite your experience, were you able to assess their immediate intentions toward the Council?" Zara-TH had finally stopped retreating, though she maintained a careful distance from the humans. Her bioluminescent patterns had settled into colors that indicated deep contemplation mixed with lingering unease. "Their surface intentions are completely genuine," she reported. "They truly wish to join the galactic community as peaceful members. They seek knowledge, trade, and friendship." She paused, her large dark eyes still reflecting remembered terror. "But, High Counselor, what lies beneath their surface thoughts, the depths of their consciousness that I barely touched? It contains possibilities that I cannot adequately describe. Not evil, not good, simply potential beyond anything I've encountered." Ambassador Kthen's shadow form had been unusually still during the exchange. Finally, he spoke in the whisper voice that his species used for serious matters. "Captain Chun, what happens if our species disappoint you? What if we prove to be threats to humanity's interests? What does this potential become then?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Every representative in the chamber understood that they were at a crucial decision point. The answer would determine whether humanity was welcomed into galactic civilization or quarantined as too dangerous to trust. Captain Chin looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, optical sensors, and other visual organs of dozens of different species. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute sincerity. Ambassador Kfen, we hope that never becomes relevant. Our species has learned, through considerable pain and effort, that our greatest strength lies not in our potential for destruction, but in our capacity for growth. We hope to learn from you as much as we hope to contribute to your civilization. She paused, and something in her expression shifted. For just a moment, several council members caught a glimpse of depths that supported everything Telepath Prime ZRTH had described. But if forced to choose between the survival of our species and maintaining peaceful relations, well, humans have always been very good at survival. The statement was delivered without threat or aggression, simply as a statement of fact. Yet every predator species in the chamber felt their hunting instincts respond to it. High Counselor Vextar realized that the council faced a choice unlike any in their recorded history. They could welcome a species that might become their greatest allies or their most dangerous enemies. The only certainty was that humanity would not simply fade quietly into the background of galactic civilization. As he prepared to call for a recess to allow the council members to deliberate, Vextar found himself wondering if they were about to make the most important decision in galactic history, or the last decision they would ever make as the dominant power in this region of space. The council chambers had been sealed for 6 hours. Emergency protocols were in effect, something that hadn't happened in over 2 centuries of galactic governance. Outside the main chamber, the human delegation waited in a comfortable but isolated diplomatic suite, completely unaware that their presence had triggered the most significant crisis the Galactic Council had ever faced. High Counselor Vextar paced restlessly around the inner circle where the Council's senior members had gathered. His scales rippled with agitation patterns that would have sent his own species fleeing for shelter. Around him, representatives from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations argued in hushed tones. The risk assessment is clear, insisted General Thakmore of the warrior caste hegemony. His 4 arms gestured emphatically while his mandibles clicked in agitation. A species that evolved to be telepathically invisible represents an unacceptable security threat. We cannot monitor their intentions, predict their actions, or assess their true capabilities. Ambassador Zephyr 97's crystalline form refracted harsh red light, her species' equivalent of sharp disagreement. General, that analysis assumes hostile intent. Their behavior has been exemplary. Their technology levels suggest they pose no immediate military threat. Their current technology levels, corrected Dr. Helix, her compound eyes processing data streams from multiple sources simultaneously. But consider their rate of advancement. They went from primitive chemical rockets to interstellar fusion drives in less than 100 years. At that pace, how long before they develop weapons we cannot comprehend? In a shielded alcove, Telepath Prime ZRTH sat in deep meditation, trying to process what she had experienced during the contact attempt. 2 other members of the Mindforge Collective flanked her, Telepath Prime Zendar and Telepath Prime Velterra. All 3 shared expressions of profound unease. ZRTH, Zendar spoke without opening his eyes. His words carried on carefully controlled psionic wavelengths. Show us again what you experienced. We must understand the nature of this threat. It wasn't a threat, ZRTH replied, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with remembered trauma. That's what makes it so terrifying. When I touched the human's mind, there was no malice, no aggression directed at us. There was simply capacity. She opened her large dark eyes and looked directly at her colleagues. Imagine touching the consciousness of a star, not the heat or the light, the raw potential for both creation and annihilation, held in perfect balance by forces beyond comprehension. Velterra's cranium pulsed with deeper contemplation patterns. You're suggesting their minds operate on principles we cannot understand rather than principles we cannot access. Exactly. When I forced contact, for that brief moment I was connected to a consciousness that thinks in paradoxes. Love and hate existing simultaneously without contradiction. The capacity for absolute mercy existing alongside the potential for ruthless pragmatism. Not as opposing forces, but as complementary aspects of a unified whole. The 3 telepaths fell silent, each processing the implications. Their species had built their entire civilization on the principle of mental harmony, thoughts shared, and refined through collective consciousness. The idea of minds that thrived on internal contradiction was fundamentally alien to everything they understood about intelligence. Meanwhile, in another section of the chamber, the military leadership was conducting their own assessment. Admiral Karath of the Void Fleet stood before a holographic display showing Earth's location relative to major trade routes and military installations. His insectoid features remained impassive as he analyzed the strategic implications of humanity's home system. Tactically speaking, he said to the assembled officers, their location is nearly perfect for disrupting shipping in 3 major sectors. If they chose to become hostile, they could strangle trade routes that supplied dozens of systems. Commander Nexus 7 of the Synthetic Coalition processed this information through quantum computing matrices that could analyze millions of tactical scenarios simultaneously. Admiral, current intelligence suggests their military capabilities are limited to short-range fusion weapons and kinetic projectiles. Hardly a threat to modern shield technology. Current capabilities, Admiral Karath emphasized. But consider their approach to problem-solving. Every human achievement we've studied shows a pattern of taking existing technologies and combining them in unexpected ways. They don't innovate through gradual improvement. They make conceptual leaps. He gestured toward a section of the display showing humanity's technological timeline. Chemical combustion to nuclear fission, 40 years. Nuclear fission to fusion power, 60 years. Fusion power to interstellar travel, 30 years. Each advancement came through connections that other species took centuries to develop. Commander Nexus 7's optical arrays focused on the data with renewed interest. You're suggesting they possess intuitive understanding of technological integration that exceeds our analytical methods. I'm suggesting they think about problems differently than we do. And beings who think differently are either invaluable allies or insurmountable enemies. The debate continued while High Counselor Vextar struggled with the most difficult decision of his long career. His species had achieved dominance through careful calculation and overwhelming force. But the humans represented variables that couldn't be calculated and potential that couldn't be measured. Ambassador Quillex approached from the Aquatic Territories delegation, her gills fluttering with nervous energy. High Counselor, may I present a different perspective? Vextar's yellow eyes focused on her with interest. The Aquatic Territories were known for their long-term thinking and cautious approach to interspecies relations. Speak freely, Ambassador. We've been analyzing human cultural transmissions that our monitoring stations intercepted before formal contact. Their entertainment media, their news broadcasts, their academic papers. The pattern we see is fascinating. Quillex activated a portable holographic display that showed compilation of human cultural elements. Music, art, literature, scientific papers, news reports. Every human civilization on their planet developed independently, often in isolation from each other. Yet they all show the same underlying pattern: rapid adaptation to changing circumstances, creative solutions to impossible problems, and the ability to maintain multiple contradictory beliefs while still functioning effectively. She gestured toward specific examples. Look at their music, mathematical precision combined with emotional expression. Their literature, logical plot structures carrying themes that defy rational analysis. Their science, rigorous methodology applied to questions that most species consider unanswerable. Dr. Helix's attention shifted from the military data to Quillex's presentation. You're suggesting their entire species exhibits the same paradoxical thinking that Telepath Prime Zara-TH encountered in their representative's mind. Exactly. This isn't an aberration or a defense mechanism. This is how humans think naturally. They don't resolve contradictions. They utilize them as tools. The implications rippled through the assembled council members. A species that could hold contradictory ideas simultaneously would be nearly impossible to predict or manipulate through conventional means. High Counselor Vextar felt the weight of galactic history pressing down on him. Ambassador Quillex, in your assessment, what would be the consequences of accepting humanity into galactic civilization? Quillex's aquatic features showed the rippling patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Unknown, High Counselor. We cannot predict how a species that thinks in paradoxes will interact with our consensus-based galactic culture. They might revolutionize our understanding of science, art, and philosophy. Or they might destabilize the entire foundation of interspecies cooperation. And the consequences of refusing their membership? Also unknown. But, based on their history, isolation has never prevented humans from achieving their goals. It has only made them more creative about finding alternative solutions. The chamber fell silent as council members processed this analysis. They were faced with a choice between known risks and unknown possibilities. Ambassador Kfen materialized from the shadows near the council's central platform. His species rarely spoke during formal debates, preferring to observe and analyze before offering opinions. High Counselor, his whisper voice carried clearly through the chamber. We have focused on the question of whether to trust humanity. Perhaps we should instead ask whether we can afford not to. All discussion stopped as the representatives turned their attention to the Void Walker ambassador. His species was known for insights that cut through conventional thinking. Explain your reasoning, Ambassador. Fen's shadow form shifted in patterns that indicated careful consideration. The humans are here. They have achieved interstellar travel. They have found us. Whether we accept them into our civilization or not, they now know we exist and where to find us. He gestured toward the sealed doors beyond which the human delegation waited. If we refuse their membership, what prevents them from developing their own alliances with species we have not yet contacted? What prevents them from creating alternative trade routes that bypass our systems? What prevents them from becoming the foundation of a rival galactic civilization? The military representatives exchanged meaningful glances. Admiral Karatha's mandibles clicked in what his species recognized as grudging acknowledgement of a valid tactical point. Ambassador Kfen raises the possibility of a worst-case scenario, Admiral Karath said slowly. If humanity develops galactic-level influence outside our control, we lose all ability to monitor or influence their development. Commander Nexus 7's quantum processors hummed audibly as they calculated probabilities. Analysis indicates a 73% probability that humanity will achieve significant galactic presence within 2 centuries regardless of our decision today. Variables include their rate of technological development, their adaptability to alien environments, and their apparent talent for forming beneficial relationships. Dr. Helix's compound eyes focused on the synthetic commander. You're suggesting that the question isn't whether humanity becomes a galactic power, but whether they become our ally or our competitor. Correction, whether they become our partner or our replacement. The blunt assessment sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. Most species in the council had achieved their positions through gradual development over millennia. The idea of being surpassed by a species barely past their atomic age was profoundly unsettling. Telepath Prime Zarth finally rose from her meditation and approached the central debate area. Her bioluminescent patterns had stabilized into deep blue hues that indicated resolved determination. High Counselor, I wish to revise my initial assessment. Vextar turned his full attention to her. Proceed, Telepath Prime. I allowed my shock at contacting an alien form of consciousness to color my interpretation of what I experienced. Upon reflection and consultation with my colleagues, I believe I mischaracterized the nature of the human mind. She moved closer to the center of the circle, her floating form steady now. The human captain's consciousness was not chaotic or contradictory. It was integrated in ways our telepathic abilities are not equipped to fully understand. When I touched her mind, I felt the presence of what I can only describe as controlled infinite potential. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. Zarth raised her hand for silence. Allow me to explain through analogy. Our minds are like precisely tuned instruments, efficient, predictable, optimized for specific purposes. The human mind is like a quantum computer, simultaneously processing multiple possibilities until the moment of decision collapses them into action. Ambassador Zephyrine 7's crystalline form began refracting light in patterns of intense interest. You're suggesting their consciousness operates on quantum principles rather than classical logic? Something similar, yes. When I tried to read Captain Chen's thoughts, I was attempting to apply classical telepathic methods to a quantum consciousness. The result was like trying to measure the exact position and momentum of a particle simultaneously. The act of observation changed what I was trying to observe. Dr. Helix's scientific background immediately grasped the implications. If human consciousness operates on quantum principles, it would explain their ability to hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously and their talent for making intuitive leaps in problem-solving. It would also explain, added Telepath Prime Zendar, why they have no natural telepathic abilities. Quantum consciousness would be inherently non-local and probabilistic rather than the direct mind-to-mind connection that telepathy requires. High Counselor Vextar felt pieces of a vast puzzle beginning to fall into place. Telepath Prime Zarath, in your revised assessment, do you consider humans to be a threat to galactic civilization? Zarath's large dark eyes reflected depths of consideration that had not been present during her initial panic. High Counselor, I believe humans are a threat to galactic civilization as we currently understand it, but not through malice or aggression. She paused, choosing her words carefully. They think so differently from us that their mere presence will force every other species to reconsider fundamental assumptions about consciousness, problem-solving, and social organization. They won't destroy our civilization, they'll make it evolve. The chamber fell into profound silence as the implications sank in. Evolution was not always a comfortable process, but it was often necessary for survival. Ambassador Quillex spoke into the quiet. High Counselor, perhaps the real question is whether we have the courage to grow. Vextar looked around the chamber at representatives from 47 different species, beings who had built the most successful intergalactic civilization in known history. They had achieved peace, prosperity, and stability through careful consensus and gradual change. The humans represented something entirely different: rapid adaptation, creative chaos, and change as a fundamental principle rather than something to be managed. Council members, he said formally, we will vote. But before we do, I want everyone to understand what we're truly deciding. He activated the chamber's main holographic display, showing a map of known galactic civilization with humanity's location highlighted. If we accept humanity into our civilization, we accept that our future will be unpredictable. They will challenge our assumptions, disrupt our comfortable patterns, and force us to become something new. The display shifted to show potential future scenarios, some showing unprecedented growth and discovery, others showing conflict and upheaval. If we refuse the membership, we guarantee that our future will include a rival civilization that thinks in ways we cannot predict or control. We will spend the next millennium wondering what they are doing beyond our borders, and whether we will recognize the galaxy when they are done with it. He deactivated the display and looked directly at each council member. The choice is not between safety and danger. The choice is between controlled change and uncontrolled change, between partnering with the unpredictable or opposing it. General Thakmore was the first to speak. High Counselor, my military training tells me that unpredictable allies are dangerous. But my strategic experience tells me that unpredictable enemies are catastrophic. Admiral Karath clicked his mandibles in agreement. The Void Fleet concurs. Better to have beings who think differently fighting alongside us than against us. One by one, the council members began stating their positions. The military representatives favored inclusion for strategic reasons. The scientific community was fascinated by the research possibilities. The telepathic species were divided between fear and curiosity. As the informal polling continued, High Counselor Vextar realized that the decision was becoming clear. Not because the council was confident in the outcome, but because all the alternatives were worse. When the last representative had spoken, Vextar called for formal order. The Galactic Council will now vote on the question of human membership. All in favor. The response was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 31 species voted to accept humanity into galactic civilization. All opposed. 12 species voted against acceptance. For abstentions, Vextar noted. The motion carries. Humanity will be offered membership in the Galactic Council. As the chamber prepared to reconvene with the human delegation, Ambassador Kfen's whisper voice carried one final observation. High Counselor, we have just voted to change the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. For better or worse, nothing will ever be the same. Vextar looked toward the sealed doors beyond which 5 humans waited, completely unaware that they had just been handed the power to reshape known space. Ambassador Kthen, he replied quietly, I believe that was always going to happen. We've simply chosen to be part of the change instead of victims of it. The great doors began to open, and the future of the galaxy walked through them on two legs, wearing simple uniforms, and thinking thoughts that no telepath could fully comprehend. 6 months had passed since humanity officially joined the Galactic Council, and High Counselor Vextar was beginning to understand that they had not simply admitted a new species to their civilization. They had fundamentally altered the nature of galactic society itself. The changes had begun immediately, and in ways no one had anticipated. Captain Sarah Chun now held the position of human ambassador to the Galactic Council, and her approach to diplomacy was unlike anything the governing body had experienced in its 1,000-year history. Instead of the careful, consensus-building methods that other species employed, humans seemed to thrive on what they called creative problem-solving. Vextar reviewed the morning's reports with growing amazement and occasional alarm. In just 6 months, human involvement had resolved 3 trade disputes that had been deadlocked for decades, introduced 17 new technologies to galactic civilization, and completely revolutionized the Council's approach to interspecies communication. The latest development was typical of humanity's impact. They had solved the crystal world mining crisis not through negotiation or force, but by suggesting something no one else had considered. High Counselor, Ambassador Chin's voice came through the communication system. We're ready to present the crystal world solution to the full council. Vextar activated his chamber's viewing screen and connected to the council session already in progress. The mining crisis had threatened to tear apart the entire Outer Rim economic zone. The crystalline collective needed rare minerals to reproduce, but the only viable sources were located in systems claimed by the warrior caste hegemony, who used those same minerals for weapons manufacturing. Traditional negotiations had failed because neither species could afford to compromise their survival needs. The crisis had been approaching the point where military intervention might be necessary. Then, the humans had asked a simple question: why are you assuming those are the only sources? Ambassador Chin stood at the center of the council chamber, her simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by most other representatives. Beside her, Dr. Webb operated a holographic display that showed stellar cartography data. Honored council members, Chin began, we've been approaching this crisis from the assumption that scarcity requires conflict. Humans have learned to question such assumptions. The holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with mineral distribution patterns highlighted in various colors. Dr. Webb's team spent the last month analyzing galactic geological data. What we discovered is that the minerals both species need don't just exist in the disputed systems, they're actually common throughout the galaxy. The problem isn't scarcity, it's detection. General Thakmore of the warrior caste leaned forward aggressively. Ambassador Chun, our surveys have been thorough. If other sources existed, we would have found them. Dr. Webb stepped forward with his characteristic gentle smile. General, your surveys were indeed thorough by conventional standards. But humans have experience thinking unconventionally. The display shifted to show comparative scanning methodologies. Your mineral detection systems are designed to find large, concentrated deposits, exactly what most species would expect to mine efficiently. But what if we're looking for the wrong thing? Ambassador Zephyr 97's crystalline form began refracting curious blue light. Dr. Webb, are you suggesting alternative extraction methods? We're suggesting alternative thinking about what constitutes a viable resource, Chin replied. Your species needs these minerals in very small quantities for reproduction. The warrior caste needs them in large quantities for manufacturing. What if both needs could be met through distributed extraction? The holographic display zoomed in to show asteroid belts, gas giant ring systems, and interstellar dust clouds throughout the galaxy. Human analysis indicates that the minerals you're fighting over exist in trace amounts throughout space. Not concentrated enough for traditional mining, but abundant enough to meet both species' needs if harvested differently. Dr. Webb activated a new section of the display showing innovative extraction technologies. We've developed collection systems based on Earth technologies for harvesting ocean minerals and atmospheric gases. Applied to space-based collection, they can gather trace minerals from sources that traditional mining would consider worthless. The chamber erupted in murmurs of surprise and interest. The technological solutions were elegant, but unconventional. Exactly what the Council was learning to expect from human contributions. General Thacmore studied the data with skeptical interest. Dr. Webb, even if these collection methods work, the energy costs would be enormous. Our species cannot afford to power galaxy-spanning collection operations. Chen's expression shifted slightly, and several council members recognized the look that typically preceded human solutions that changed everything. General, what if the collection operations powered themselves? She gestured toward the display, which now showed energy collection systems integrated with the mineral extraction technology. Humans have experience with something called solar sailing, using stellar radiation for propulsion. We've adapted the principle for automated collection vessels. The display showed fleets of small, autonomous spacecraft that could drift through space, collecting trace minerals while using stellar radiation and magnetic fields for power and navigation. The beautiful part, Dr. Webb added, is that the same energy sources that power the collectors can also be used to refine the materials on site. Each vessel becomes a complete mining and refining operation. Ambassador Quillex's gills fluttered with excitement. You're proposing to turn the entire galaxy into a distributed mining operation using self-sustaining technology? We're proposing to eliminate scarcity through abundance, Chen replied. Instead of fighting over limited concentrated resources, we create unlimited distributed resources. Telepath Prime Zarath had remained quiet during the presentation, but now she floated closer to examine the holographic data. Her bioluminescent patterns showed deep contemplation mixed with amazement. Ambassador Chen, she said slowly, this solution doesn't just address the mining crisis. It would revolutionize resource acquisition for every species in the galaxy. That's the idea, Chen confirmed. Humans have learned that the best solutions to immediate problems often create opportunities that no one anticipated. High Counselor Vextar felt the familiar combination of admiration and unease that human solutions always provoked. The proposal was brilliant, practical, and would indeed solve the crisis while benefiting everyone involved. It was also completely unlike any approach galactic civilization had ever considered. Ambassador Chen, he said formally, this proposal will require extensive analysis and testing before implementation. The technological and economic implications are staggering. Of course, High Counselor, we wouldn't expect immediate adoption of such a radical approach. But we've prepared preliminary testing data. Dr. Webb activated another section of the display showing real-world results. We've been running collection tests in the solar system for the past 3 months. The efficiency rates exceed projections by significant margins. The data was impressive. The human collection systems were not only viable, but highly effective. Several council members began calculating the implications for their own species' resource needs. Admiral Karath spoke for the first time during the session. Dr. Webb, these collection vessels, they're essentially autonomous spacecraft capable of long-range operation throughout the galaxy. From a security perspective, that represents significant surveillance and potential military capabilities. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. The council chamber fell silent as representatives realized that the humans had once again introduced solutions that carried implications far beyond their intended purpose. Chen's expression remained calm, but several council members noticed the subtle shift in her posture that they were learning to recognize as a sign of human seriousness. Admiral Karath, you raise a valid concern. Yes, the collection fleet would represent a galaxy-spanning network of autonomous vessels. Yes, they could potentially be used for surveillance or military purposes. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. We're prepared to address that concern in the same way we address all security issues, through transparency and partnership. Dr. Webb stepped forward again. Admiral, human experience has taught us that the best defense against technology being misused is to make sure everyone understands how it works. The holographic display shifted to show detailed technical specifications for every component of the collection system, Power sources, navigation, communication, mineral processing, everything. We're prepared to share all technical data with the Council. Every species that wants to participate in the collection network will have complete access to the technology. No one has to trust anyone else's intentions because everyone will have the ability to monitor and verify operations. Ambassador Kthin materialized from the shadows near the Council platform. Dr. Webb, you're suggesting that security through secrecy should be replaced with security through transparency. We're suggesting that when everyone has the same capabilities, no one has a permanent advantage, Chen replied. Competition becomes collaboration, and conflict becomes cooperation. The simplicity of the concept was deceptive. Most galactic civilizations maintain security through carefully controlled technological advantages and strategic information management. The human approach of shared technology and open data represented a fundamentally different philosophy. Telepath Prime Velterra, who rarely spoke in council sessions, floated forward to address the human delegation. Ambassador Chun, your species continues to propose solutions that require other species to abandon established survival strategies. Why should we trust that cooperation will provide better security than the methods that have kept peace for centuries? Chen's response was immediate and carried the weight of genuine conviction. Telepath Prime, because our methods have never kept peace for centuries. Human civilization has only existed for a few thousand years, and most of that time has been spent in conflict. We've learned, through considerable pain and loss, that security based on advantage over others is temporary. Security based on mutual benefit is sustainable. She gestured toward the technical specifications still displayed in the holographic projector. Every human technological advancement we've shared with the Council could theoretically be used against us. Our fusion drives could power weapons that target Earth. Our communication systems could be used to coordinate attacks against human vessels. Our resource extraction technology could be used to deny us access to materials we need. Dr. Webb nodded in agreement. But we've shared them anyway, because human experience has taught us that civilizations grow stronger through cooperation than through competition. The chamber remained silent as council members processed this philosophy. Most species had achieved interstellar capability through careful technological development and strategic advantage maintenance. The human approach of immediate technological sharing was unprecedented. High Counselor Vextar found himself facing another moment of decision that could reshape galactic civilization. The human solution to the mining crisis was elegant and beneficial, but it required the Council to adopt an entirely new approach to interspecies security and cooperation. Council members, he said formally, we have before us a proposal that addresses our immediate crisis while potentially revolutionizing our approach to resource management. However, it also requires us to fundamentally alter our security paradigms. He looked directly at Ambassador Chun. Ambassador, human proposals consistently require other species to take unprecedented risks in pursuit of unprecedented benefits. How do we evaluate such choices? Chen's expression softened slightly, and for a moment she looked less like a diplomat and more like a teacher addressing students. High Counselor, humans don't ask anyone to take risks we're not willing to take ourselves. Every proposal we make, every technology we share, every cooperation we suggest, we implement first in our own systems with our own resources. Dr. Webb activated a new section of the holographic display showing human star systems throughout local space. These are human colonies and installations that are currently using every technology we've proposed to the Council. We're not asking you to be test subjects. We're asking you to be partners. The display showed human space as a network of cooperation and shared resources rather than a collection of defended territories. It was a completely different model of civilization than anything in galactic history. Ambassador Zephyr 97's crystalline form had been refracting contemplative light throughout the discussion. Finally, she spoke. High Counselor, I believe we're facing the same choice we faced when humanity first requested membership. We can maintain our established methods and watch them develop alternatives without us, or we can participate in their approach and help shape its development. General Thakmore's mandibles clicked in what his species recognized as reluctant acceptance of logic. The warrior caste has analyzed human military capabilities extensively. Their technological sharing has not weakened their defensive abilities. It has strengthened their alliance networks. Admiral Karath processed this information through his strategic analysis systems. Confirmed. Species that adopt human technologies and cooperation models show increased stability and security rather than increased vulnerability. Telepath Prime Zara-TH floated closer to the human delegation, her bioluminescent patterns showing colors of resolved decision. Ambassador Chun, the Mindforge Collective will support this proposal. We have observed human cooperation methods for 6 months now, and we believe they represent evolution rather than revolution. One by one, other council members began indicating their support, not because they were certain of the outcome, but because the human track record of beneficial solutions had earned their trust. High Counselor Vextar realized that the council was about to make another historic decision, but this time, it felt less like a leap into the unknown and more like a natural next step. The Council will vote on the implementation of distributed resource collection as a solution to the mining crisis, with full technological sharing and cooperative oversight as proposed by the human delegation. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 38 species voted in favor, with only 6 opposed and 3 abstentions. As the Council session concluded and representatives began discussing implementation details, Vextar found himself reflecting on the changes humanity had brought to galactic civilization. 6 months ago, the Council had been a careful balance of competing interests, maintained through elaborate protocols and guarded cooperation. Today, it was becoming something entirely different, a true partnership based on shared benefits and mutual trust. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Several species had struggled to adapt to human methods of open communication and rapid problem-solving. But even the most conservative council members had to admit that the results spoke for themselves. Trade disputes that had seemed unsolvable were being resolved through creative compromise. Technological development was accelerating through shared research. Interspecies conflicts were being prevented through early collaboration rather than late intervention. Ambassador Chen approached as the chamber began to empty. High Counselor, there's something else we'd like to discuss with you privately. Vextar felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and apprehension that human conversations always provoked. Of course, Ambassador. What's on your mind? Chen looked around the nearly empty chamber, then back at him with an expression of serious purpose. High Counselor, we've been in galactic civilization for 6 months now. We've learned a great deal about how the Council operates and the challenges it faces. We have some thoughts about broader improvements that might benefit everyone. Dr. Webb joined them, carrying a data pad filled with what looked like extensive analysis and planning documents. Specifically, Chun continued, we think there might be opportunities to extend the cooperation model beyond resource sharing and conflict resolution. Vextar found himself both curious and concerned about what the humans might have in mind. Their previous suggestions had always been beneficial, but they had also always been transformative in ways that no one anticipated. What kind of opportunities, Ambassador? Chen's expression shifted into what Vextar was learning to recognize as the look humans wore when they were about to change everything again. Well, High Counselor, we've been wondering if the Council has ever considered expansion beyond this galaxy. The suggestion hung in the air like a physical presence. Intergalactic exploration had been theoretical discussion for centuries among galactic civilizations, but no one had seriously considered it as a practical possibility. Ambassador Chun, Vextar said slowly, are you suggesting that humanity has developed intergalactic travel capabilities? We're suggesting that humanity has developed intergalactic thinking capabilities, Dr. Webb replied with his characteristic gentle smile. The technology is just engineering. High Counselor Vextar looked at the 2 humans standing before him. Beings who had joined galactic civilization as seemingly primitive newcomers just 6 months ago, and who were now casually discussing technologies that could reshape the universe itself. He realized that the Council's decision to accept humanity had not just changed their civilization. It had committed them to a future of constant change, continuous growth, and unlimited possibilities. For better or worse, They were no longer a galactic civilization content with managing their small corner of space. They had become partners with a species that thought in terms of infinite potential. And Vextar found himself looking forward to seeing what humans would suggest next.